fire with a blood-stained finish line that suddenly seemed like the furthest place from glory in Boston.
Even if they got a head start, they couldn't run fast enough from the fear that connected a nation divided by rivers and made up lines like anything that cut this country suddenly pulsed with a common anger. 3 dead.
264 injured.
Martin William Richard.
The youngest of 3 to bear the burden of a nation's strife.
A martyr for those who lost limbs,
sight,
hearing,
and safety to be considered lucky in comparison.
His family being the prime example of what happens when you lose your faith in the freedom of open space. Martin dead.
Sisters like amputated.
Mother half blind.
Father scarred by shrapnel, now locked down to the confinement of a wheelchair in the darkness of day.
Blood-stained broken pavement became an emblem that burned those events into our memory when a mother's tears became a universal language that spat fire into the words of a nation. When bombs bloomed onto city streets in early spring.
Breathe deep and you could have smelled the intoxicating fear of a nation.
Could have felt the overwhelming heat from the blast.
Could have heard the desperate cries from the innocent.
And if you looked close enough, you would have realized that this isn't Boston. Welcome to Baghdad. We're outside the city's international airport. 2 car bombs exploded, leaving 3 dead and 16 injured.
That day in Baghdad alone, the equivalent of over 10 Boston bombings erupted in streets, markets, and bus stops, leaving 27 other civilians massacred.
When I got home that day, I walked into my living room to see pixelated political pundits transform themselves into public service announcers, repeating the names of the deceased and injured while the muted screams captured on camera were being televised in the background. We never heard any names from Baghdad. We never saw the repetition of B-roll displaying the blast from Iraq.
If the only thing connecting me to the horrific bombings in Boston is my nationality, then when did my compassion cease to cross my country's borders?
I shouldn't have to export my empathy.
When looking back on that day, the only time the Middle East creeps into our collective thought
is when we look for an origin of our attacker.
Not sympathizing with a nation that knows all too well the taste of our contempt,
but turning on them as the cause of that fire in our bellies.
We focus in on the lines of longitude that divide us.
On April 15th, our country decided to sit alone in suffering, rather than admit and broadcast that attacks on innocent human beings is a daily affair.
April 11th, 2 dead in Thailand.
April 12th, 4 dead in Mali.
April 13th, 9 dead in Pakistan.
April 14th, 35 dead in Somalia.
April 15th, 75 dead in Iraq.
April 16th, 119 dead in Syria. There's a Boston every day, and we're just too damn blind to see it. So we should consider ourselves lucky that only the corner of Boylston Street burned that day.
When every day, the hearts of a people hated unjustly and constricted to historical cycles burns with the fire that flows from mouths and car bombs.
Please, we're not saying this wasn't a tragedy. Every life lost is a tragedy.
But the only way to heal our world from the wounds we face daily is to stitch and tie those lines that pulse over oceans.
To learn to appreciate the sadness over the statistics.
The feelings over the facts.
And finally realize that a mother's tears are a universal language.
I was gonna ask you.